Hey everybody, and welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. This is episode 8 of our series, and I'm your host, Natan Solomon. On Techstrong Unplugged, we dive into all things tech and get people up to speed with everything happening across the industry. Recently, our co-host Cassandra Chin went to the Great International Developer Summit, also known as GIDS 2024. At GIDS 2024, Cassandra sat down with Ken Kousen, who is a seasoned software developer, educator, and author of 6 books. Ken dives into his approach to education, and he emphasizes the importance of hands-on experience, test-driven development, and engaging with open-source projects. Ken also explores the challenges of teaching in a male-dominated field and the significance of supporting underrepresented communities in tech. Finally, Ken and Cassandra touch on the evolving landscape of AI and its impact on beginning developers. Without further ado, let's head over to GIDS 2024.
Welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. I'm your host, Cassandra Chin, and today we have Ken with us here today. Do a brief introduction.
Oh, you want me to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a one-person company, software developer. I mostly teach technical training classes. I've been doing that for about, almost 20 years on my own. But I also teach in academic circles. I'm a professor at Trinity College in Hartford, and I've been a speaker and author of 6 different books, now working on a 7th. Anything else you want to know?
That's a lot of books you've written before.
Well, just to tell you, I didn't write my first book until I was actually 50 years old. So it's never too late. You know, don't think if you don't get it early, you still have an opportunity to do it. The economics of technical book writing, by the way, if you were to buy one of my books, I can buy a cup of coffee, but not at Starbucks.
Not at Starbucks?
Finance, no.
Are you sure it's even a cup of coffee?
Probably not, but I could get it somewhere, you know.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your values on education and...
Well, my whole career since I moved to IT has been based on the idea of teaching training classes and passing on what I've learned to other people. In fact, it's kind of a personal mission statement, I guess, is that I really like learning new things. I like working with it. I don't feel I have to be the person who invented it. I just want to learn what's been done and what the cool new toys are, and then telling everybody about it, passing that on to others so that they can take advantage of what I've learned. So that to me is fun, you know, to experiment with the new toys and then say, hey, look at what you could do with this and look what you could do with that. So that's really behind a lot of the speaking and the writing and the blog or the newsletter or the YouTube channel, all of it.
So you don't feel like you always have to be the one to create that technology yourself?
I actually don't even really enjoy that as much. I mean, I did that. I was a research scientist prior to being a developer. And, you know, all the easy problems have been solved, you know, so you're always working really hard and you always had to get funding and things like that. I never liked begging for money. No, it's more like I like learning, and therefore I would, like in the Groovy community, I used to make friends with the core team members and then see what they did and go, oh, cool, then I get to play with it. It's like they're making the toys I get to play with. And the Java world is like that now. That I enjoy that much more than making the actual toys. I like playing with the toys.
How do you balance, like, showing off the toys? Because you're not the one who made it, so you can't take credit for it.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, I do have to, well, first of all, to figure out how to work with them, I do tend to focus on the test cases. As the better the developer, the more tests they write, and the high quality tests will show you how the developer intended for the toy to be used. You know, it'll give you the sense of it. The release notes will explain what they were after. So I'm mostly focused on what we actually have, the documentation, the tests, and if I still get stuck and I don't know what to do, most of them are more than happy to share that information. You just contact them and say, hey, I'm writing this up. I want to advertise. It's a way of participating in open source as someone supporting the developers without competing with them. I mean, I'm not unhappy that they did it and I didn't. What did this mean? What was that for? How do we use that? You know, they generally welcome questions like that as long as it's not, yeah, I don't know how we do that.
Have you ever heard of the saying, like, test twice, code once?
It's an old cliche, right? And it's based on measure twice,
Yeah.
once on manufacturing. I don't know. I'm not great at doing pure test-driven development. I do agree that you never trust a test you haven't seen fail. You have to see it fail. Otherwise, you could wind up with one that passes all the time, doesn't test anything. But I tend to follow, instead of pure TDD, I tend to follow what I call GDD. So instead of test-driven development, I do what's called guilt-driven development. If I write code that hadn't been tested, I'm worried about it. I feel guilty until I put a test.
I really like that saying.
Feel free to take advantage.
Guilt-driven development.
Yeah. I mean, I like JUnit, of course. I like AssertJ. I think that's a really good testing library. I like property-based testing with JQuick as a way to find out the boundaries of what works and what doesn't. So I'm a big fan of that. I use tests and Spring Framework tests all the time. Testing to me is like, otherwise I just am worried that I'm wrong. I mean, how do you know you're right unless you have a test to show it?
I think that's really great to value testing.
I'm glad. I mean, I never understood developers who say they didn't want to test. I feel I code a lot faster if I have the tests. And of course, now with the AI tools, they can write a lot of the tests for you. You just have to check and make sure that what they're generating makes sense. But that speeds up the process, and that also gives you the confidence and the freedom to refactor. You have to be careful that the tests don't overspecify how things are done, that they're just testing what to do. Because if they overspecify the how, then you're locked into a particular implementation. You don't want that. You just want to test a high-level use cases. What is this supposed to do? And I go from there. I wrote, one of my books is on the Mockito testing framework. How do we use Mockito? And I think I'm doing a talk on that on Friday, on how to use that to make mocks and stubs and spies for your classes.
You mentioned how you're at this stage in your career where you want to really pass on your knowledge to the younger generation.
Absolutely. I think that's really important, especially because the AI tools are going to possibly be a threat to a lot of the beginner developer jobs, because the AI tools can do a lot of routine stuff well. And a lot of early developers in their career learned how to do these things on the jobs that were fairly routine. It's important that I try to make sure they know how to do these tools. I do enjoy teaching the more advanced classes, frankly. I get tired of teaching intro Java again, But in general, I'm at the stage in my career where, I've kind of achieved everything I was looking for. I've been very fortunate. But it's time to pass that on to the next generation, and especially for, women and underrepresented minorities. People who have not had the same opportunities. I at least have benefited from that. I'm an old white male. What are they going to do? That I'm not. The barrier I encounter, by the way, is age issues, because this is a very young community, right?
Yeah.
And if the average age of developers is like the late 20s, early 30s, and I walk in there, people worry that, is this a curmudgeon who's just going to say, it was so much better back in my day, and all this new stuff is awful. And I don't know. I have to convince them that I have something to contribute. But that takes me 5-10 minutes. I can get there, whereas I don't have the actual disadvantage that a woman or an underrepresented minority might have to overcome just to be heard. I figure if I can help them get an opportunity, if I can give them the information they need, tell them what things are actually like out there, maybe even make introductions and stuff like that, help you build your network. Yeah, I really like that. I'm glad, because I don't want to take all these other jobs. I want to help somebody else get them.
How do you actually reach these underrepresented communities?
That is actually tough, because we are a very diverse crowd internationally, but not, we're very male-dominated, as you know. It's kind of ridiculous. So what I do is I try to seek out speakers and things at conferences like this who are women or underrepresented minorities and make sure I pay attention. Frankly, sometimes all you have to do is listen, and not talk down to them and not be difficult or anything. And that's enough, and that's all they need is some validation and possibly help getting an opportunity, but mostly just basic respect. And it works wonders. Because they're so happy to get it, So
I think for you, that would be like striking up a conversation with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, go to a talk, and then after the talk, tell them you thought that I did a great job or what you liked about it. The other thing I've noticed, of course, I have several friends who are, in those categories. And like Trisha G, for example. I don't know if you know Trisha.
Yeah, I think I know her.
Yeah, she's outstanding. Java champion and everything. I think she works for Gradle these days. At any rate, she doesn't like getting invited to conferences to talk about women's issues again, So I make sure when I talk to her to focus on technical problems that I know she has an expertise on it. She also is really good at the soft skills too. So I ask her about that stuff, and I try to say, if you want to talk about women's issues, we could talk about women's issues. But if you're tired of all that, we could do something else.
I have some speaker friends who are women, and they say they're tired of talking on being the only woman on panels.
I know, and it's just, there is a number problem, and some of that does, in fact, come from the pipeline, that there aren't enough women and underrepresented minorities in the pipeline. But a lot more of the problem is the attrition rate, is how many women leave the field within the first 5 years, and underrepresented minorities too. Any woman I know who's been in IT for more than 5 years, I automatically have respect for. It's hard to be in a male-dominated field anyway, and there's a lot of what I call boys behaving badly out there. Yeah, I try to step up and stop that.
When you first get into your career as a woman, it might even take 5 years for someone to suggest you come to a conference. And when you go to a conference, you meet cool people like you who really give women respect. But until you actually go to a conference, like, you're in your little bubble of guys working together, and that's a challenge.
It's true. It's hard for everybody to break outside their bubble, always. But women have certain advantages in that the numbers are small, and therefore conference organizers are looking for them. It's really partly it's the classic problem they say of men will often apply for jobs when they don't have the skills, and women won't. And what you need allies. You need more senior people, men, women, or anybody who can encourage you and say, you know what, throw in a proposal. If you go, you go. If you don't go, okay, fine. You haven't lost anything. And you also start making contacts, because a lot of the conferences look for people they know and have done these things before. So that initial breakthrough that you're talking about, that is an issue for everybody. It may very well be harder for women. Again, you'd know better than I would on that. But you solve it the same way you solve anything else. You build your network. You establish your reputation. I got on a speaker tour when I wrote my first book, and I had to keep bugging the organizer for months to let me on the tour. So you never know.
So I think we definitely need more great allies like you.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I do what I can. I don't know how much I can do, but I can provide some emotional support. And
well, you're here with me today, so I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad to do that. And as I say, also I'm joining the faculty at Trinity College full time, so I'll be teaching a lot of undergrads. And what I try to do in my class is to say, look, let's not worry about what's in the textbook. This is what's going on in the community right now. So a news item will come up like Redis changing its license, or that XZ problem that provide a backdoor into the secure sockets and everything. We use that as a case study, and we talk about it, what's happening in the community.
So you just put that textbook aside?
Yeah, I'd rather do the more senior level classes so that it's not just canned material, but that way we could say, oh, and by the way, I know this is what the book says, but IT is one of the few areas where the working professionals are ahead of the academics, with certain exceptions, of course. But when I was in engineering, the academics were ahead, because the people have been building bridges for thousands of years. But IT stuff, it's the people in the community who are doing the innovative stuff and learning things all the time. And that's what I feel like I can bring in and say to the students, hey, let's get involved in an open source project. Let's see what they're doing. Write test cases. See what the best developers do.
Honestly, I think that's the best advice you can give, asking them to get on an open source project while they're still in school.
Yeah, you just have to be careful, because just like anything, there's good and there's bad. So it's part of the challenge is assessing which ones are worth your time and which ones are worth your energy. Find the right community. That's actually more important than the actual library you're working on. You find the right group of people, and it's a really enjoyable experience. You find the wrong group of people, you don't want to do it at all anymore.
I hear a lot of advice, which just the advice is join an open source project and get involved. But you really break it down like it's people behind the projects.
Well, and the difficulty again is that a lot of open source people, they welcome people joining the team, but not if they're just going to be there for a semester. You know what I mean? They want to form a longer term relationship, and they don't want to have to teach the very basics of all the tools. So there is a startup cost. You have to learn how to do issues in Git and merges and pull requests. You have to learn how to write test cases and learn what the deployment processes are. There's a lot to learn. But if you can find the right team that's willing to accept newcomers, then yes, it'll put you at an enormous advantage. Because even if when you go interviewing as a young student to get a job, companies will look and say, well, what have you done? You say, well, I contributed to open source. They may not even care what the project is. The fact that you did something that's real world matters. That really helps.
Yeah. So in your classes, are you teaching like the startup cost? Like you're getting them to know how to use the tools?
We try. I mean, we do have to spend time on Git, for example, because everything's using a Git repository somewhere. We talk about, how you raise issues and how you write test cases and what's a normal agile process. What's the difference between committers and contributors? And you can just write documentation and you're a contributor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they think, well, if I don't write code, I'm not really a contributor. Heck, I suffer from that. I have one commit to the Groovy code base, and I wrote a whole book, and then yet the people, the committers say, no, you're a contributor. And I'm like, but all I did was one commit, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, we try to do that as much as we can.
Okay. I think we had a really good chat today.
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you, Ken.
And good luck with the other interviews or whatever you're doing and whatever you're using this for. Let me know if it goes live.
It will definitely go live on Techstrong TV.
Techstrong TV? Great. Well, thank you very much.